What happens when a simple act of kindness transforms lives in unexpected ways? Sarah's story begins on an ordinary day as she shops at a supermarket, trying to balance her tight budget. A single mother of 4, Sarah faces the daily challenges of raising her family alone, but today, the weight of the bills feels heavier than ever. When she realizes at the checkout that she doesn't have enough money to pay for all her items, embarrassment consumes her. The cashier, in a disrespectful act, humiliates her in front of everyone. At the height of her distress, an elderly man named George, who was in line behind her, decides to speak up and offers to pay the difference. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Sarah promises to reimburse him. As they leave the supermarket, George surprises Sarah by revealing that he is the owner of the supermarket chain. He does not hesitate to reprimand the cashier for her lack of empathy. During the drive to her home, he helps her carry the bags, and Sarah, touched by the stranger's kindness, opens her heart. She shares the tragic story of losing her husband, Michael, who disappeared in a car accident, leaving a massive void in her life and that of her children. His body was never found, and the pain of burying an empty coffin marks Sarah's life. Moved by Sarah's pain, George decides to use his resources to help her. He hires a detective, Henry, to investigate Michael's disappearance. After an intense search, Henry brings an unexpected revelation. Michael is alive. Rescued by hermits after the accident, he lost his memory and cannot remember who he is. From there, George and Henry work together to bring Michael back to his family, and the reunion is an emotional moment filled with tears and joy. Over time, George becomes a father figure to Sarah's children, bringing new warmth and hope into the household. But life presents new challenges when George falls gravely ill and needs a blood transfusion. To everyone's surprise, Michael turns out to be a compatible donor. The story becomes even more complicated when they discover that, due to a maternity error, Michael is actually George's biological son. The revelation brings forth a series of emotions and changes. Michael takes over George's business, who spends his last years surrounded by the family he always wanted, finally united. The story of overcoming, love, and discovery transforms the lives of everyone involved, showing that even in the most difficult situations, life can offer surprising and renewing twists. Sarah, George, and Michael learn that the true value of human relationships goes beyond what can be seen, and that the kindness of a stranger can truly change the fate of many lives. Sarah was in a moment of vulnerability. After the unexpected meeting with George, she felt more hopeful, but the reality of her life as a single mother still weighed heavily on her shoulders. The children demanded attention, and the bills continued to pile up. Although she was grateful to George for his help, she did not know how she could repay him or if she would be able to face the new challenges ahead. Sarah's routine became a constant battle. She woke up before the sun rose, organizing breakfast and getting the children ready for school. The little ones, Anna, Lucas, Tiago, and the youngest, Bella, were her reason for living, but also a source of stress. The days were long and exhausting, and the worry about the future kept her restless. Even with the renewed hope after the reunion with Michael, the weight of uncertainty made her question her inner strength. George, in turn, was not just a successful businessman. He also carried his own emotional scars. The loss of his wife years ago left him with a void he tried to fill by helping others. He dedicated himself to supporting Sarah and her children, but the relationship began to complicate when he realized his health was deteriorating. The illness that struck him suddenly left him fragile and worried about the future of the people who had become so important to him. Meanwhile, Michael, after being found, struggled to readapt to life. He was unaware of his true identity and the past that awaited him. Although he had reunited with Sarah and the children, the absence of memories prevented him from feeling part of the family. Additionally, the revelation that he was actually George's biological son further complicated his journey. Michael found himself torn between the need to connect with his past and the responsibility of being a father to Sarah's children. The challenges began to accumulate like a storm about to burst. Sarah felt exhausted and, in a moment of weakness, decided that she needed a break. She asked George to take care of the kids for a weekend, something she normally wouldn't do. But the pressure of responsibilities made her feel it was necessary. George, understanding Sarah's need, agreed to stay with the children. However, when Sarah left, something unexpected happened. During that weekend, George's health worsened. He didn't want to worry Sarah, so instead of seeking help, he tried to handle the situation alone. Michael, noticing that something was wrong, decided to intervene. He called an ambulance, and George was taken to the hospital, where he received a diagnosis of a serious illness that required immediate treatment. When Sarah returned home and found the children worried and Michael anxious, her heart sank. The atmosphere that had once been filled with hope was now laden with tension and fear. She felt guilty for having stepped away, even if it was just for a short time. George's fragility made her question whether he could be the anchor that she and her children so desperately needed. Life was unfolding in ways she could never have predicted. In the following days, the situation worsened. George's treatment required financial resources that he had not planned for. Sarah, feeling helpless, began to question whether she could continue to care for her children while also supporting George. She was trapped in a cycle of guilt and anxiety, and the desire to be strong for everyone began to weigh heavily on her heart. Meanwhile, Michael faced his own demons. He wanted to connect more with Sarah and the children, but his confused identity and recent revelations made everything more difficult. The friendship that had begun to blossom between him and Sarah was becoming a minefield of emotions. Was it possible to build a healthy relationship, knowing that the connection between them was so complex? Emotional tension grew as Sarah and Michael tried to find a balance in their new lives, but the challenges seemed insurmountable. George's health continued to fluctuate, and the pressure of caring for the children while dealing with her own insecurities left Sarah on the verge of collapse. The struggle for survival, the search for love, and the need to rise again became a labyrinth with no way out. Amidst all these difficulties, Sarah found herself at a turning point. She needed to decide whether she would continue to fight alone or open her heart to the help that surrounded her. What seemed to be a simple act of kindness from a stranger was transforming into a network of support, but the question that haunted her was, how far was she willing to go to protect her family and find happiness again? Sarah felt that the world around her was crumbling. After George's diagnosis, anxiety turned into an unbearable weight in her chest. She struggled to maintain the appearance that everything was under control, but the nights were long and filled with insomnia as her thoughts revolved around the uncertain future awaiting her family. The worried look of Lucas and Anna followed her, and she knew her children sensed the tension in the air. Their innocence could not protect them from the reality that was approaching. Meanwhile, George was in the hospital, and the fragility of his health made Sarah feel guilty for having distanced herself. She couldn't understand why George hadn't asked for help before. The idea that he had tried to face everything alone left her troubled. Sarah wondered if he was still the anchor she needed, or if, on the contrary, he was becoming yet another burden to carry. Michael, for his part, was trying to integrate into the new family dynamic, but the absence of memories left him confused. He felt like an intruder, even in the face of Sarah's goodwill and the children's warmth. The relationship with Sarah, which had started to flow naturally, was now wrapped in a tangle of emotions. George's presence in the hospital made Michael question whether he should distance himself or draw even closer. He wanted to help, but didn't know how, and that uncertainty only increased his frustration. In a moment of despair, Sarah decided she needed support. She remembered a group of mothers she had met at a craft workshop a few months ago. They had become friends, sharing experiences and daily challenges. With a bit of hesitation, she decided to reach out to them. The friends quickly mobilized, offering help with the children and even bringing food to Sarah's house. This gesture of kindness brought a little relief but did not erase the worry consuming her. However, the situation at the hospital was not improving. George was facing severe side effects from the treatment and was becoming increasingly dependent on care. Sarah found herself torn between the demands of the children and the need to be by George's side. Each time she left the hospital, she felt guilty. It was as if she was abandoning someone who needed her, even though her children were also crying out for attention. Although her friends helped her, Sarah felt that she wasn't doing enough. The weight of responsibility left her exhausted. On one of those difficult days, she decided she needed to talk to Michael. They met in the park, where the children were playing under the watchful eyes of some mothers from the group. The air was fresh, but the conversation that followed was heavy. Michael expressed his concern about George's situation and the way Sarah was handling everything. He tried to be gentle, but his words sounded like a criticism. "You can't do everything alone, Sarah. It's time to accept that you need help," he said, his tone sincere but frustrated. Sarah became irritated. How could he understand what she was going through? The pain of seeing him so close to the children yet so distant left her feeling insecure. "You don't know what this is like, Michael. You have no idea what it's like to take care of 4 kids while also being beside someone who is dying." The words came out more intensely than she intended. The tension between them grew, and the friendship that had seemed promising was now turning into an emotional battlefield. However, the discord brought to light something Sarah needed to hear. Michael, in his own vulnerability, spoke about his struggle to understand who he really was. "I'm lost too, Sarah. But you don't have to be strong all the time. Sometimes we need to admit that we're struggling and allow others to help." These words resonated with Sarah. She realized she was isolating herself, not just from Michael, but from everyone around her. The idea of opening her heart and accepting help felt daunting, but it was a lesson she needed to learn. Life wasn't meant to be lived alone, and this constant struggle was pushing her to her limits. That night, while the children slept, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by bills and task reminders. She felt exhausted and lost, but also determined to change the situation. She needed to find a way to gather strength, not just for herself, but for everyone she loved. What seemed like a maze with no exit could, in fact, be a path of learning and growth. Sarah decided she was ready to confront her fears and allow the people around her to be part of her journey, even if that meant letting go of control. The next morning, Sarah woke up with a weight on her chest. The previous night had been a turning point, and the conversation with Michael echoed in her mind. She knew she needed to change, but she wasn't sure how to start. As she prepared breakfast, the smiling faces of Lucas and Anna brought a faint smile to her lips. However, the worry about George still consumed her. As soon as the children went to school, Sarah decided she would visit George in the hospital. It had become a daily ritual that now felt almost like an obligation. Upon entering the room, she found George sitting on the bed, looking tired but still full of love in his gaze. He smiled upon seeing her, but Sarah noticed something different in him. a deep sadness that shone through his smile. "How are you feeling today?" Sarah asked, trying to hide the worry in her voice. "One day at a time, right?" George replied, but his voice was weaker than usual. This weakness made Sarah's heart ache. She sat by his side, holding his hand, wishing she could transmit strength through her touch. During the visit, George began to talk about his memories, recalling happy moments from the family. He mentioned a summer they spent at the beach, and Sarah's eyes filled with tears. The light conversation quickly turned into a reflection on the future. George, with a fragility that scared her, said, "Sarah, I don't know how much time I have left, but I want you and the kids to be happy. I don't want you to feel tied to me or to a past we can no longer live." These words hit Sarah like a punch to the stomach. The idea that George was preparing for a farewell left her in shock. The reality that she could lose the love of her life hit her brutally. However, amidst the pain, she felt a wave of clarity. George didn't want her to carry all the weight alone. He wanted her to live, even if that meant moving on without him. As she left the hospital, Sarah felt like she was in a whirlwind. George's words made her reconsider her choices. She realized that in her struggle to be strong, she had ignored what truly mattered, the happiness and well-being of her family. The children needed a present mother, and George needed a partner who wasn't so consumed by the fear of the future. That same afternoon, while the children were at school, Sarah decided it was time to take action. She picked up the phone and called her friends from the craft group. With a trembling voice, she explained the situation and asked for help. "I can't do this alone. I need you," she said, feeling a sense of relief as she finally opened her heart. The friends responded with love and support, promising to help her in every possible way. That night, Sarah organized a simple yet special dinner for the children. She wanted to create a light and joyful atmosphere despite the storm approaching. As she prepared the meal, she recalled the happy moments George had mentioned. The joy and laughter of the children were like balm for her soul. She realized that even amidst suffering, there was space for happiness. However, the true turning point came when Michael unexpectedly showed up at the door. He had brought some food and a warm smile. "I thought you might need a helping hand," he said as the children surrounded him with excitement. Sarah smiled, feeling grateful for his presence. The night was filled with laughter and stories. Sarah watched the children having fun and felt a wave of love and gratitude. Michael was there beside her, and she realized she didn't have to face everything alone. The weight that once felt unbearable now seemed a little lighter. As the children slept, Sarah and Michael sat in the living room, talking about life and the challenges they faced. He shared his own insecurities and fears, and she felt closer to him than ever. It was as if they were building a new support network together. The revelation Sarah had that night was clear. Life was made up of ups and downs, and accepting help was not a sign of weakness, but of strength. The future was still uncertain, but she was willing to face whatever came her way, not alone, but surrounded by people who loved her. It was time to let go of the shackles of fear and embrace life, with all its imperfections. The following week, Sarah began to feel the effects of the decision she had made. With the support of her friends and the comforting presence of Michael, she started to open up more to the life around her. The children, Lucas and Anna, noticed the change in their mother. There was more laughter in the house, and moments of sadness became less frequent. Sarah tried to create a welcoming environment where everyone could share their feelings, even the most difficult ones. One morning, as the children got ready for school, Sarah decided it was time to talk about George. She sat down at the table, breakfast already served, and looked into her children's eyes. She wanted to talk about their dad, she said, her voice firm yet gentle. Lucas and Anna exchanged glances, a bit apprehensive, but they listened attentively. He was going through a tough time, she explained, but that didn't mean they should forget the good moments they shared together. They would remember the love they always had and continue to take care of one another. The children nodded, and a sincere conversation unfolded. Talking about George was not easy, but Sarah felt relieved. She realized that making space for the pain was also a way to honor the life they had shared. It was an important step for all of them, a moment of connection that would strengthen their family. In the days that followed, Sarah committed to visiting George more frequently, taking the children along. Each visit to the hospital became a new opportunity to create memories, even amidst the sadness. George always greeted his children with a smile, and their interactions were filled with love. He told funny stories from when they were little, making everyone laugh, even if just for a brief moment. However, the reality of George's illness weighed heavily on everyone. During one visit, Sarah noticed he was weaker. The smile that once seemed so present was now harder to maintain. That day, while the children played in the hospital corridor, Sarah sat beside George and held his hand. "You're fighting, aren't you?" she asked, her voice choked. "Yes, but sometimes it's hard," he replied, looking at her with an expression of vulnerability. "I just want you all to be happy, to find your way even when I'm not here." His words pierced Sarah's heart, but they also motivated her to be stronger. After that conversation, Sarah decided that she needed to take care of herself too. She began to engage in small activities that made her happy. On Thursdays, she joined her friends for crafting, and those nights became sacred. The laughter and sharing of experiences helped her recharge. But at the same time, Sarah felt a new weight. The worry about George's health and the responsibility of caring for the children were always present. One night, while at home, she received a message from Michael asking if he could stop by to see how they were doing. Sarah hesitated, feeling a bit overwhelmed. But at the same time, she knew that having someone to talk to could help her. He arrived with a warm smile and a homemade cake he had made. As they talked, Sarah opened her heart. "I feel like I'm losing control. Sometimes I don't know if I can handle all of this." Michael listened attentively, without interrupting. When she finished, he looked her in the eyes and said, "You don't have to do this alone. I'm here to help. Let's find ways to deal with this together." Those words brought a comfort that Sarah hadn't expected. She realized that even amidst the chaos, there were people willing to support her. This new support network encouraged her to move forward, even when the days felt heavy. However, new challenges arose. George's health began to deteriorate, and hospital visits became more frequent. Sarah tried to be strong but sometimes felt lost. The children noticed the change in their mother, and that worried her even more. She didn't want them to feel the weight of her sadness. During one of those visits, while watching George rest, Sarah had a moment of introspection. She realized that even amidst the pain, there was beauty in the little things. The smiles of her children, the laughter shared with friends, the support of Michael. It was a reminder that despite the difficulties, life still had its joyful moments. Sarah decided she couldn't lose sight of those moments. She committed to finding a balance between pain and happiness, between sadness and love. This new perspective helped her face what was to come with a little more courage, knowing that no matter what happened, she wouldn't be alone. Sarah was in a moment of transition, navigating a sea of contradictory emotions. George's health was rapidly deteriorating, and each visit to the hospital brought new worries. She struggled against feelings of helplessness, but at the same time, there was an emerging strength within her. The support of her friends and the constant presence of Michael helped her see that she didn't have to face everything alone. The children, Lucas and Anna, were growing and beginning to grasp the gravity of the situation. Sarah worked hard to maintain their family routine, but the nights were long. Sometimes she found herself awake, thinking about how drastically life had changed. The pain of separation and worry over George's health made her feel vulnerable. But as she reflected on these difficulties, Sarah began to understand that she needed to trust herself more and accept the help around her. One day, after a particularly difficult visit to the hospital, Sarah sat with the children on the couch. They were quiet, their eyes downcast. Sarah took a deep breath and decided it was time to talk about her feelings. "I know things are tough right now," she began, "but I want you to know that we are all in this together. We can feel sadness, but we also need to remember the good things and the love we have for each other." Lucas, with the sincerity of a child, asked, "Mom, are you sad because Dad is sick?" This question opened the door for an honest conversation. Sarah explained that yes, she was sad, but she was also grateful for the memories they had together as a family. "We need to support each other and take care of one another. That's what family does," she emphasized, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. These conversations became a new ritual at home. Every night, before bed, they gathered to share their joys and sorrows. And in doing so, Sarah began to realize that she was not only rebuilding her children's lives but her own life as well. She was learning to open up, to express her feelings, and this vulnerability made her stronger. Over the weeks, Sarah allowed herself to feel the pain and sadness but also began to seek ways to celebrate life. In her crafting group, she shared her experiences, and her friends encouraged her to create a special project in honor of George. They decided to make a memory album, gathering photos, stories, and messages that the children could share with their dad. This idea brought new purpose to Sarah, and she felt more connected to George, even in his absence. During one hospital visit, Sarah presented George with the album she had created with the children. He flipped through the pages, his eyes shining with love and nostalgia. "This is wonderful, Sarah. Thank you for keeping our memories alive," he said, and that expression of gratitude warmed her heart. In that moment, Sarah understood that success was not just about having everything under control, but about finding beauty in the little things and valuing the bonds they had built. As George's health continued to decline, Sarah's life began to blossom in unexpected ways. She became more involved in the community, helping with local events and bringing people together around causes that mattered to her. This new perspective on life made her realize that love, friendship, and solidarity were the true riches, far beyond any material possessions. Sarah also began to reflect on her own needs. She realized that taking care of herself was not a selfish act, but essential for her to care for others. Thus, she started to carve out time for herself, engaging in activities that brought her joy, like gardening and reading. These small joys became fundamental in her journey of overcoming challenges. When George finally passed away, Sarah felt an indescribable pain, but also the certainty that she had done her best. She had learned to face adversity with courage, to accept help, and to trust herself. Amid the sadness, there was a new understanding. Life was precious, and even in the darkest hours, there was space for light. Over time, Sarah became an example of resilience for her children and friends. By sharing her lessons, she helped others find strength in their own difficulties. The love she cultivated, the memories she preserved, and the friendships she built became the pillars of her new life. And so, with each step taken, Sarah transformed into a stronger, wiser woman, more connected to what truly mattered. Sarah felt the weight of sadness as she walked down the hospital corridor. The air was heavy, and the cold light from the lamps seemed to reflect her emotional state. George's health had deteriorated rapidly in the past few weeks, and each visit became more difficult. She remembered the vibrant man he had been, now reduced to a fragile body, and the pain of seeing him like that was almost unbearable. But on that day, something inside her urged her to move forward, to find a way to cope with the situation. When she entered the room, George was lying down, his face tired, but he still smiled upon seeing her. "Hi, Sarah," he said, his voice weak but filled with affection. She sat beside him, holding his hand, and the silence between them was heavy yet comforting. She knew she had to be strong, not just for him, but also for Lucas and Anna. The weight of responsibility began to feel like an enormous pressure, and the thought of losing George paralyzed her. The conversation flowed slowly, filled with memories and laughter. But as the hours passed, Sarah felt she could no longer hide the truth that consumed her. The words were stuck in her throat, as if the pain she felt was preventing her voice from coming out. She took a deep breath and, in a moment of vulnerability, decided to open her heart. "George, I'm so scared. I don't know how I'm going to handle all of this. The kids need you, and I need you," she confessed, tears streaming down her face. George looked at her tenderly, and in his eyes, there was a deep understanding. "Sarah, you are stronger than you think. You always have been. Remember that the love we built doesn't end here. You and the kids have a future ahead, and I want you to live it fully. Promise me you won't let sadness consume you," he said, with visible effort. That conversation was a turning point for Sarah. She realized she needed to honor George's memory and the love they shared, even in the face of pain. That night, as she walked down the hospital corridor, Sarah felt a new purpose wash over her. She understood that George was right. Life goes on, and she needed to embrace what was to come. When she arrived home, she found Lucas and Anna sleeping, their serene faces illuminated by the moonlight streaming through the window. She smiled, remembering what George had said. Life was precious, and she had to fight for them. In the following days, Sarah began to make changes in her routine. She focused on creating a warm and positive environment for the children. Together, they started planning a celebration of life in honor of George. The idea of transforming pain into love helped her find the strength she thought she had lost. They created panels with photos, stories, and even a song that George loved. The day of the celebration brought friends and family together, and despite the tears, there was a feeling of unity and love in the air. The celebration was a moment of healing. The stories shared, the laughter exchanged, and the music played filled everyone's hearts. Sarah realized that even in pain, there was beauty. She was surrounded by people who loved George as much as she did and who were willing to support her. It was a powerful reminder that life is made of ups and downs, and that friendship and solidarity can help overcome the toughest moments. After the celebration, Sarah felt lighter. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, but she was determined to face it. She began to apply the lessons she had learned, the importance of opening up, seeking support, and valuing the simple moments. The nights of conversation with Lucas and Anna became even more meaningful, and together, they continued to create memories that honored George. As time passed, Sarah became an example of resilience and love. By helping others in similar situations, she realized that pain could transform into strength, and that even in loss, there was always room for light. That journey not only helped her face her grief, but also shaped her into a stronger woman, more aware of what truly mattered in life. And as she looked to the future, Sarah knew that with love and unity, she could face any challenge that came her way. Sarah watched the sunlight streaming through the living room window, illuminating Lucas and Anna's faces as they played on the floor. There was an air of normalcy in the house, something she wasn't sure she could regain after losing George. However, seeing the joy in the children filled her with a wave of hope. That morning, while preparing breakfast, Sarah reflected on the changes she had made since George's celebration of life. She had committed to keeping his memory alive, not just through events or recollections, but also in the way she lived and taught her children. "Life is precious," George always said. Sarah wanted Lucas and Anna to understand that. After breakfast, Sarah decided it was time for an honest conversation. She gathered the children in the living room and, with a gentle smile, began, "I want to talk to you about Dad." Lucas and Anna stopped what they were doing and looked at her, their eyes filled with curiosity and a bit of apprehension. "Dad will always be a part of us. He loved us very much, and I want you to know that it's normal to miss him," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "But I also want us to remember the good times, the laughter, and the stories he told." Anna, with her delicate voice, asked, "Mom, why did Dad have to go away?" The question cut Sarah's heart, but she knew it was important to answer honestly. "Sometimes, people get sick and can no longer stay with us. And that is very sad. But it doesn't mean his love is gone. He will always be in our hearts." Lucas, with his typical childlike frankness, said, "I miss him when I see those birds he liked. He always said they were free." Sarah smiled, admiring how Lucas made connections. "Yes, they are like Dad. He is free now and will always watch over us with love." The conversation continued, and even though tears streamed down Sarah's face, there was a sense of relief. Talking about George helped not only the children but also her. It was an important step for all of them, a step towards healing. In the following days, Sarah started a new tradition. Every Sunday, the family would gather to share memories about George. This became a special moment where they could talk about what they loved most about him, tell funny stories, or simply reminisce about happy times. These gatherings were a balm for the pain they felt, and with each meeting, their bond grew stronger. Furthermore, Sarah decided to become more involved in the community. She started participating in a support group for people in mourning, where she found others facing similar challenges. The meetings were a safe space where they could share their pains and triumphs, and Sarah realized that by helping others, she was also helping herself. She had a new purpose, a new path illuminated by the love that George had always taught her to cherish. One night, as they were getting ready for bed, Anna turned to Sarah and said, "Mom, I feel sad sometimes, but when I remember Dad's stories, I feel better." Sarah hugged her, feeling the warmth of the love between them. "That's normal, my love. Missing someone is part of the love we feel, and it's good to remember him." These moments became the new normal. Sarah had learned to accept the pain, to live it, but also to celebrate it. She realized that although life without George was challenging, there was beauty in the way the family came together to face the pain. And thus, with each passing day, Sarah felt stronger, more capable of caring for Lucas and Anna, and more certain that even amid sadness, love would always prevail. The emotional impact transformed not only Sarah's life but also that of her children. They learned to talk about their feelings, to support each other, and to appreciate the small moments together. Sarah knew that the journey was far from easy, but she also understood that they were all in this together, and George's love would continue to guide them. As the months went by, Sarah noticed that the pain of losing George had transformed into a gentle memory, marked by enduring love. The new tradition of sharing memories on Sundays became a foundation for the family. Lucas and Anna, once immersed in painful silence, now spoke openly about their feelings. They laughed at George's funny stories and shared their longings, creating a safe space where pain could coexist with joy. Sarah felt a profound growth within herself. She not only had overcome the loss but had also become a stronger and more present mother. With each meeting, with each new story told, she found a new sense of purpose in life. The pain taught her to value the small moments and the importance of being present. Sarah began to realize that even in George's absence, life continued to offer beauty and love. Moreover, the support group meetings transformed Sarah's life in unexpected ways. She connected with others who were facing similar struggles, and through these connections, she discovered a new purpose. Sarah began to help others find comfort in their own grief journeys, and this exchange became a source of strength and inspiration for her. What started as an attempt to cope with pain turned into an opportunity for growth and mutual learning. The children, in turn, learned to express their feelings in healthy ways. Lucas, who had once felt lost, began to draw the birds that his father loved so much, and Anna became a storyteller, sharing her imaginary adventures with the family. The atmosphere in Sarah's home now overflowed with love and understanding. She watched her children thrive amid the pain, and that brought her a new sense of hope. One morning, while having breakfast, Lucas said, "Mom, I want to be like Dad. He always helped people." Sarah smiled, proud. "You can be my love, and I will help you do that." With that, they began planning small charitable actions, like helping at a local shelter and participating in community activities. These actions not only honored George's memory but also strengthened their family bonds, bringing even greater meaning to their lives. Sarah looked at Lucas and Anna, now happier and more confident, and knew that although life without George was a challenging reality, they had found a way to live with love and hope. She realized that true wealth lay in the connection they shared, in the memories they created together, and in how they supported each other. At the end of a long day, as they prepared for bed, Sarah reflected on her journey. She had learned that pain can be transformed into strength and that love is a powerful agent of change. What seemed like an end had revealed itself, in fact, as a new beginning. For those reading this story, it serves as an important reminder. Life is full of challenges, but each one brings valuable lessons. Do not be afraid to feel, to share, and to seek support. And remember, even in the darkest hours, there is always a light that can shine. How about sharing your own experiences of overcoming in the comments? Together, we can create a space of support and inspiration. Like and subscribe for more stories that touch the heart and remind us of the strength of love and resilience. Your voice is important, and your interaction helps bring more content like this. Don't wait until tomorrow to share what you can today.